talk a little bit today about a subject that I've struggled with in terms of how to address, and I'm going to finish my remarks by offering a bill up for the Senate's consideration. Mr. President, I know you are aware of all this, but we can't live without glucose. Glucose fuels our cells, and of course our cells make up our muscles and our tissues and our organs. And we can't live without insulin. Insulin is a hormone that regulates the amount of glucose in our blood. Thankfully, for most people, their pancreas produces insulin naturally. But it's just an undeniable fact. Without insulin, without glucose, you're dead. Unfortunately, as you know, Mr. President, sometimes our pancreas does not create insulin, or doesn't create enough insulin, or creates it erratically. And that condition, of course, is called diabetes. Thankfully, 100 years ago, in 1920, a Canadian physician and scientist, his name was Dr. Frederick Banting. He invented a synthetic form of insulin to help people whose pancreas could not produce the hormone. He won a Nobel Prize for it. It was extraordinary. And he was so committed to helping humanity that he and his other colleagues who had patents on this synthetic insulin, they sold their insulin patents for $1. $1. They wanted to make sure that insulin was affordable. God bless them. Today, 34.2 million Americans have diabetes. Now, not all people who have diabetes need insulin, but of that 34.2 million people, 7.4 million people need synthetic insulin. Otherwise, they're dead men. They're dead women. 88 million Americans have what we call prediabetes. That means they're just a hair away from having full-blown diabetes. It's a problem in Louisiana, Mr. President, as I'm sure it might be in Colorado. Louisiana has about 500,000 people with diabetes, most of whom need insulin. That's 12% of my population. Now here, Mr. President, is where the story becomes dark. 3 pharmaceutical companies have a monopoly on synthetic insulin. These 3 companies control about 90% of the global supply of insulin. Diabetes is certainly not unique to Americans. And these 3 pharmaceutical companies control virtually 100% of the United States market. Their cost, as best I can tell, you'll not be surprised to learn, Mr. President, that a lot of the cost of these pharmaceutical drugs, and that's what synthetic insulin is, some call it a biologic, but the cost, as best I can tell, to produce a vial of insulin is about $10 in today's dollars. There is no viable generic. You got to buy a brand name from one of the 3 companies. Now, the cost of synthetic insulin has increased fairly recently very dramatically. The average list price for insulin tripled from 2002 to 2013. And then from 2013 to 2016, it doubled again. In the last 10 years, the out-of-pocket cost, because many people have insurance, not everyone, but many people have insurance. In the last 10 years, the out-of-pocket cost of insulin for the average patient has doubled. And most diabetes patients, to give you some context, require 2, quite often 3 vials a month. Let me try to get out of the conceptual and be specific. One type of insulin, I don't mean just to single it out, but it's called Humalog. It was released in 1996. Its price since 1996, cost about $10 to make it per vial, has increased 1,700%. It's gone from $21 a vial to $375 a vial. Now, that same vial in Canada costs $375 here, costs about $50 in Canada. And remember, you need 3 vials, sometimes 2, hopefully, a month to live, to survive. So if you use 3 vials a month at $375 a crack, the cost has gone from $750 a year in 1996 to $13,500 a year. And nothing's changed about the insulin. This insulin is 100 years old. 100 years old. Now that, of course, is the list price. As we know, many people have insurance, and there are all sorts of insurance plans with differing amounts of deductions and differing amounts of co-pays. But I think a recent report by the Health Cost Institute is instructive. It found that the average American with type 1 diabetes who needs insulin has out-of-pocket insulin costs every year of about $6,000. That's every year. And you'll not be surprised to learn, Mr. President, as a result of that, about 1 in 4 Americans have to ration their insulin. They don't take their full doses to make it last longer. Now, I have a bill, Mr. President. It's called Ending the Pricey Insulation Act. I don't know where my staff comes up with these names. I can hardly say that. Anyway, it's to try to lower the cost of insulin. It's going to cap out-of-pocket costs for insulin. If this bill, in its wisdom, it passes the Senate. It's going to cap the cost at $50 for a 30-day supply. It's going to cap the cost for people who have insurance. It's going to cap the cost for people who have Medicare. It's going to cap the cost for people who have Medicaid. And it's going to cap the cost for people who don't have anything, no insurance whatsoever. It's going to cover high-deductible health plans. It's going to cover the CHIP program. It's going to cover veterans' health plans. It's going to cover TRICARE. It's going to cover everybody. Maximum out-of-pocket cost per month, $50. This plan is going to take effect this bill would take effect for plan year 2022. Health plans, as you know, Mr. President, set their rates 6 to 9 months in advance. And so I want to give them fair warning here. So that my bill provides a workable runway for the insurance plans to comply. But the bill does include a retroactive clause that ensures any out-of-pocket cost above $50 that a person pays after enactment will be reimbursed. The bill's only 5 pages long. I don't think it's complicated to fix this problem. Now, I really struggled with whether to offer this bill, Mr. President. And let me say first, I'm not trying to pick on our pharmaceutical drug companies. You know, what they've done in the last year is nothing short of miraculous. To me, it's just evidence that American and human ingenuity can never be underestimated. And it's extraordinary what the private sector can accomplish when government gets out of the way. I'm talking, of course, about the coronavirus vaccines. I happen to have two brothers who are physicians, and I called both of them right after the coronavirus was determined to be the coronavirus and said, how long for a vaccine? And they all said minimum 2 years, probably 3, 4. Pharmaceutical drug industry did it in less than a year. God bless them. So I don't mean to criticize them. And I understand they have research costs, and I understand they have marketing costs. And I certainly understand that the health insurance delivery system and the market itself is opaque. God, how did we design such a system? I yearn for the day, we all do, when we have a healthcare delivery system for pharmaceutical drugs. It looks like somebody designed it on purpose. And I've spent a lot of time, I certainly don't pretend to be an expert, but researching the problems surrounding the cost of insulin. And everybody blames everybody else. The pharmaceutical drug companies blame the PBMs. The PBMs blame the insurance companies. They all blame each other. Some of them blame the doctors. Some of them blame patients for whining. At some point you say, gosh, why? It's almost as if you're intentionally making it opaque. And that's a big part of our health insurance market problem. I was reading an article the other day, slightly different subject. As you know, the Trump administration issued an executive order saying hospitals have to post their prices. And the hospital sued, and the government won, and so now the hospitals have to post their prices. And the Wall Street Journal did a very interesting investigative piece. It really was a fine piece of work in this post-journalism, pay-to-play world that we live in. And it looked at the website of all the major hospitals throughout the United States. And it found, I don't remember the number, but over 100 that had implemented or put it on their website software so that their posted prices for their services that they offer, which the executive order required, was there on the website. You just couldn't see it. So consumers couldn't find it. And those that could find it had to go through about 10 different layers to get to it. And when the Wall Street Journal contacted the hospitals, they said, oh, whoops, it's just a software mistake. We'll get it fixed. So the market is opaque. And look, some of my colleagues are going to oppose this bill, and I understand their point of view, saying, Kennedy, this is price fixing. Well, we thought you were a free market guy. I am. I don't want to have to do this. But we've been talking about this problem for years, and it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And I think the members of the United States Senate, the most interesting group of people I've ever been around, are intelligent enough to understand nuance. They understand that this is price fixing, but they also understand that this argument, well, you're going down a slippery slope. No, we're not. There's nothing in this bill that says we have to go down a slippery slope. I think most fair-minded people understand that insulin as a biologic, as a pharmaceutical drug, is unique. We're not talking about a drug that our pharmaceutical industries have spent hundreds of billions of dollars developing, taking on extraordinary risk. This is a product that's been around since 1920. It's virtually unchanged. It costs $10 a vial to produce. There's virtually no risk, none whatsoever. It hasn't changed much in 100 years, and people have to have it. The costs have been recouped long ago. And I think, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but I think a big part of the problem is the fact that 3 companies have a monopoly. And there is no generic. because some people engage in what is called evergreening, which is a very clever way devised by the patent lawyers to keep patents from ever running out. And I'm just tired of us holding hearings and issuing press releases and talking to the press about it and then doing nothing. And I just say I'm going to end because I know Senator Crapo has something he wants to say, and I want to hear him. I really struggle with this, and I guess I am being inconsistent because I do believe in the free market. I don't believe in having government set prices. But I don't know what else to do. And I don't think we're going down a slippery slope. Insulin's unique. We've all got good pairs of LL Bean and other boots to keep us from going down that slippery slope. There's no law that says the United States Senate can't consider issues on an ad hoc basis. Senators understand nuance. And in any event, I'd rather be right than consistent. So for that reason, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of S1132, introduced earlier today. I ask unanimous consent that the bill be considered read third time and passed. And I ask unanimous consent that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection? Senator Vermont.
Reserving the right to object. First of all, I want to respond to Senator Kennedy. The first thing I want to say, Senator Kennedy, is I'm impressed. You did this in only 5 pages. I wish we could all learn to write our legislation in 5 pages or less. And I don't disagree with the history Senator Kennedy went through, with his declaration, his powerful declaration that this is a critical issue that we must deal with. And I don't disagree with the fact that we've got to have some serious pressure built here in the United States Congress to get this over the finish line. That being said, what Senator Kennedy's asking us to do, and I think we just got this language last night, what Senator Kennedy is asking us to do today is to bypass the committee and go immediately to the floor with his language. And there are several reasons why I'm going to ultimately have to object to that. The first is that he's correct. I and a number of my colleagues who would be here if I weren't standing here have a real problem with the solution, the mechanism that Senator Kennedy has chosen. Just outright price fixing, and Senator Kennedy doesn't even try to deny that. Going beyond just imposing government regulatory price controls in government-run programs, but through the private market as well. And that is a solution mechanism that I've opposed and many of my colleagues oppose in terms of dealing with this issue. And for that reason, that's one of the key reasons for my objection. The other one is, though, that the committee, the Finance Committee, on which I'm the ranking member, is working on this, and I know that that's not an answer, because the Finance Committee's been working on this now for a year or two, or more. But there is work underway in a number of different arenas to try to get a handle on how to solve this without having to take the drastic step of just having the government come in and take control of a private sector market. And I'll just point, for example, to what happened under the Trump administration in just the last couple of years. Through the Trump administration's effort to try to deal with this, a demonstration project has been operating in which, under Medicare Part D, in which the effort was to try to get the monthly cost of insulin down to $35 a month. And they've had some success in that program to demonstrate how it can be accomplished. Now, look, I get that Medicare Part D is different than private sector insurance, and it's different than Medicaid, and it's different than other pieces of our healthcare system. It's different than CHIPS. But in one sector, a pretty significant sector, we've got some solutions that are starting to show real potential. In addition, as Senator Kennedy knows, I've drafted legislation last Congress and I'm working on that legislation in this Congress that will deal not just with insulin, but with many different other pieces of drug pricing in our system. And I can tell you that Senator Wyden, my counterpart on the Democrat side in the Finance Committee, himself has been working on his own ideas, and he and I have been working hard to prioritize this to get to a solution in the committee. And I know I talked to Senator Wyden just before I came to the floor. Senator Wyden and I both welcome the opportunity, Senator Kennedy, to work with you as we try to put together that bipartisan solution. I know that there would be other senators on the other side of this issue who would stand here if I weren't today, saying they don't like this solution because they want it to go further the other direction. They want to see a complete government takeover of the entire market and move to a single payer system, and that single payer being the government. That's another thing that some on my side have been working hard not to have happen. But there's a lot of political controversy over what the mechanism must be. And that's the primary reason why I want this to be able to be worked on in the committee in the proper way that we manage legislation in the Senate. And I commit to you, Senator Kennedy, that you can be as engaged as you want to be with us in that as we move forward. But it's not time right now to come and bypass that whole process. I think Senator Kennedy would probably make a very powerful rejoinder that, we've heard that we're working on it a lot. And we need to now get to the point where we put solutions here on the floor for the entire Senate to consider. But today is not the day to do it by a unanimous consent request. And for that purpose, Mr. President, I do object.
Objection is heard. Senator from Louisiana.
Mr. President, my colleague, the senator from Idaho, knows how much I respect him, and I appreciate the invitation to work with him and his committee, and I intend to do that. And I know that the senator didn't say this, but I don't believe in government-run health care. But we have a discrete problem here in a very unique situation that can be addressed. This is not a biologic that, as I said earlier, that costs hundreds of millions of dollars to develop. This is insulin. And a lot of Americans need it or they will die. And there is a monopoly. And there are efforts that have been made to maintain that monopoly. And my people in Louisiana, I know the people in Idaho many of them feel the same way. And that's why they applaud Senator Crapo's efforts. But they're hurting. You can die without insulin. You can die. And it costs $10 a vial to make. And it's been around 100 years, and now it costs $375. And all you got to do is walk across the border into Canada, and you can buy it for $50. And the market's being manipulated. And I think, and I know it's complicated, and I understand politics. I've been around it a good portion of my life. But this is an issue where we need to stop. We need to stop talking about it, strutting around, issuing press releases, holding hearings, and doing nothing. And I don't want a price fix. I don't. And it makes me real uncomfortable to be proposing this. But I don't know what else to do. There comes a point where patience ceases to be a virtue. And here's what I know. I mean, the bill's been objected to, and I appreciate it. You pass a bill like this, or a similar bill like this, you're going to see a solution pretty fast, Mr. President. You're going to see a solution real fast. You're going to see this opaque market react with new energy. They're going to be running around like hounds from hell, trying to keep this from becoming the law. And that's why we need to hit this head on. But with that, I thank the President for his attention, and I thank my colleague for his eloquent remarks. I suggest, Mr. President, absence of a quorum.